There is a feeling most people carry without naming it. It is quieter than grief, boredom, or loneliness, though it can wear any of those faces. It is a background sense that something is slightly missing, that the current arrangement of life is not quite enough, that if one or two things were different, if someone were beside you, if someone needed you, if someone truly understood you, you would finally arrive at a version of yourself that felt complete. This is apurnatvam, the felt sense of incompleteness, the nagging suspicion that you are insufficient as you currently are. Every person born into a body and a mind knows this feeling. The forms vary. One person feels it most sharply alone on a Sunday evening, another after a breakup, another inside a marriage, staring at a ceiling at night. The form changes. The underlying feeling does not. The mind concludes, I am incomplete, therefore something is missing, therefore I must find what is missing and add it. The most powerful candidate in almost every life is another person. A partner who chooses you confirms that you are worth choosing. A family you build proves you are not alone. A lover who stays tells you, implicitly, that you are enough. The search begins, not for a specific person, but for the feeling that person is supposed to deliver. The search is for the resolution of a poornatvam. The person is the proposed solution. Relationships carry this weight because they are not being asked to provide companionship alone. They are being asked to answer a question the mind has already decided it cannot answer for itself. Am I, as I am, enough? When someone chooses you, stays, and reflects warmth back at you, the ache quiets. This is what gets mistaken for love working. When the relationship ends or fails to deliver what was expected, the ache returns, louder than before. The mind draws what feels like the obvious conclusion. The wrong person, the wrong circumstances, not enough love yet given or received. Try again. This cycle follows directly from a premise that feels entirely obvious. I am incomplete, and I need something external to complete me. The question Vedanta asks is not whether the pursuit of relationships is foolish. The question is whether the premise is accurate. No external addition can resolve what is, at root, a mistaken conclusion about oneself. Here is the assumption underneath every relationship entered for the wrong reason, that adding one person to another person will produce something that neither person alone could be, that two incomplete things will somehow sum to completeness. The math does not work. Start with what you are before any relationship enters the picture. The ego, the self identified with this body, this history, this particular bundle of fears and hopes, is finite, has edges, is uncertain about its own worth, and needs things to go a certain way to feel okay. Now add another person. That person is also finite. They also have edges, uncertainties, needs. Their sense of security also depends on conditions outside themselves. One insecure person plus one insecure person equals two insecure people. And doubled anxiety, not completion, amplification. Now there is twice as much that can go wrong, twice as many fragile conditions to protect, twice the fear of loss. Finite plus finite remains finite, no matter how many times you repeat the operation. The assumption is that love, closeness, belonging are substances located inside another person, and that by joining with them, you will receive a transfer of those substances into yourself. The other person has no stockpile of completeness to give you. They are in the same position you are. Two people cannot give each other what neither of them has. A broomstick does not become something other than a broomstick because you wrap it in gold. The ego that felt insufficient before the relationship is still there inside it, now wearing a different label. The underlying sense of being a limited entity, of needing things to go right in order to feel whole, has not been touched. It cannot be touched by the addition of another person, because it was never caused by the absence of one. Each new addition increases the stakes rather than reducing the anxiety. The more you have placed your sense of security in a relationship, the more you fear its loss. The crutch multiplies the fear of falling, not because the crutch is worthless, but because you have let it become the leg. Accumulation, which seems like the solution, is the engine of the very anxiety it was supposed to cure. This confusion that another person can solve an internal problem is the default assumption of an ego that does not yet know what it is. The ego concludes that it is insufficient, and then, not knowing where insufficiency comes from, reaches for the nearest obvious remedy, someone else. The reach is entirely logical given the premise. The problem is the premise itself. If the emptiness is not caused by the absence of the right person, what is causing it? The feeling of emptiness is evidence of a conclusion you have drawn about yourself. If the emptiness is a mistaken conclusion, then no acquisition can touch it. You would be trying to solve a geometry problem by rearranging furniture. Vedanta names this mistaken conclusion apurnatvam, the quiet, background verdict that I am limited, I am small, I am incomplete. This verdict does not announce itself. It sits underneath every assessment you make of your situation, shaping what you reach for and what you fear losing. Every ego, by its structure, takes itself to be insufficient. The mind does not sit still with the judgment that it is incomplete. It immediately begins scanning for a solution. Because the verdict feels emotional, felt as an ache, a hollowness, a restlessness, the mind searches for an emotional solution. Enter the other person. This is where Sangha takes hold. Sangha is not fondness for another person, but emotional dependence, the state in which your sense of well-being has been outsourced to someone else's presence, behavior, or approval. The relationship is no longer something you participate in, it becomes something you lean on. The other person is now quietly carrying the weight of resolving your sense of inadequacy, a task they were never equipped to perform and never agreed to perform. When you enter a relationship from a place of inner lack, the organizing question underneath it is, what do I get from this? Does this person make me feel less empty? Do they confirm that I am worth being with? Do they fill enough of the ache that I can stop feeling it? The relationship has become, at its root, a transaction conducted in the currency of self-worth. Think of someone who needs to hear "I love you" regularly, not as an expression of joy in the relationship, but as relief. Without it, the anxiety returns. The reassurance works like a painkiller. It suppresses the symptom for a while, but the underlying condition has not changed. The next dose will be needed. A finite reassurance cannot permanently resolve a conclusion you are continuously regenerating from within. Sangha is a self-knowledge problem that has moved into the relationship. The person depending on constant reassurance is not needy because of something wrong with them. They are needy because a poornatvam has not been examined. The sense of lack is taken as a fact about themselves, and the relationship is drafted into service of managing that fact. When Sangha is the organizing principle of a relationship, the relationship cannot give you what you are looking for. What you are looking for is an end to the felt sense of being incomplete. What the relationship can offer is temporary comfort, genuine companionship, shared experience, all real goods, but none of them the cure for a self-judgment that lives entirely inside your own mind. There is a crucial difference between losing someone and losing the floor beneath you. Most people who have gone through a significant relationship ending know it is the second feeling, not grief at the departure of another person, but the sensation that the ground itself has dissolved. When a person uses another human being as a psychological crutch, when the relationship is secretly functioning as the answer to the question, am I worth being with? The other person is no longer a person, they are load-bearing. When they leave, or change, or stop behaving in the way that was supporting the weight, the collapse is total. This is what Raga produces. Raga is the psychological dependence on another person born from a needy, unfilled center. The ego reaching outward because it cannot stand on its own. The focus of Raga is always inward. What do I get from this? That calculus runs silently beneath what feels like love. And it is what makes the relationship so fragile. The more weight you place on a crutch, the more terrifying its removal becomes. Emotional dependence does not reduce anxiety. It multiplies it. Each new crutch, whether wealth, status, or intimate relationship, creates a new source of dread. You begin to scan for signs that the person might leave. You interpret their moods as evidence about your worth. You become quietly controlling, or desperately accommodating, or both. The relationship that was supposed to end the aching has instead handed you a new and more specific set of fears. A person with weak legs relies on a walking stick completely. The stick works until it doesn't. Those legs have not gotten stronger. The weakness that required the crutch is unchanged, and the dependency has deepened because the person has organized their mobility entirely around a borrowed prop. When it is removed, they do not lose the stick. They lose the capacity they outsource to it. The inner sense of incompleteness, the apurnatvam, does not diminish through a relationship. It is suppressed by it. The partner's presence papers over the gap. Their attention becomes the temporary floor. Because that floor is made of another person's moods and choices and availability, it will shift. When it does, the collapse feels like devastation, like the end of everything. But it is not the end of love. It is the withdrawal of a crutch that was being treated as a leg. The strategy cannot work. The weakness is internal. The crutch is external. No crutch can cure the weakness it compensates for. The pain following a relationship's collapse is real, but it points at something other than what it appears to point at. It is proof that something was outsourced that cannot be outsourced. The sense that one is complete and worth being with. If detaching from this dependence is what is needed, wouldn't letting go of the crutch confirm the fear that without it, there is nothing there? Here is where most people stop. The logic is intellectually acceptable. Yes, dependence creates vulnerability. Yes, the crutch eventually breaks, but then comes the immediate, visceral resistance. If I stop leaning on people, what exactly am I left with? The honest answer that rises from the gut is not peaceful. It is terrifying. An empty mind, a silent apartment, no one who needs you, no one whose need you can fill, just the flat, unbroken fact of your own company. This fear is the accurate recognition of what detachment feels like before it is understood. The mind that has been organized around another person, their moods, their needs, their schedule, their opinion of you, does not become quiet when that organization dissolves. It becomes loud in a different way. The ache you were managing through activity and connection now has nowhere to go. This is what people mean when they say they would rather stay in a bad relationship than face themselves alone. Vedanta does not dismiss this, but it makes a precise distinction that changes everything. Two different states look identical from the outside and feel nearly identical from the inside. At first, the first is loneliness, the painful experience of absence, of needing someone to be present and finding no one. The second is aloneness, which the tradition calls advaitam, literally non-dual or one without a second. Advaitam differs from loneliness not by the presence or absence of people, but by whether you arrive at solitude carrying a vacuum that needs filling, or whether you arrive already full. Parents who have built their emotional architecture entirely around their children find themselves devastated when the children grow up and leave. The house is the same house. The quiet was always there between conversations. But now the quiet has no interruption coming, and what was background becomes foreground. The pain is real. It is the sudden exposure of an inner emptiness that the children's presence was managing without either party knowing it. The children did not create the fullness. They were covering a lack that was there before they were born. The vacuum you fear finding, if you stop relying on relationships, is something detachment reveals. It was already there. The relationship was sitting on top of it. The terror is if I let go, I will fall into emptiness. But the emptiness is the reason you were holding on so hard in the first place. You have been managing it for years, not dissolving it. Vedanta's response here is not a consolation but a correction. The instruction is not endure the vacuum and eventually it passes. The instruction is look more carefully at what you are calling a vacuum. You have been told, by culture, by instinct, by every love song ever written, that the hollow feeling inside you is evidence of something missing. The question the tradition asks is simpler and more unsettling. Who is aware of this hollow feeling? That awareness, the one registering the ache, the flatness, the quiet that feels like absence, is not itself hollow. If it were Vichara, it could not know hollowness. A genuinely empty vessel cannot report its own emptiness. The reporting requires a presence. When that inner fullness is discovered rather than merely asserted, something changes in how solitude lands. The absence of people does not disappear from experience, but it stops being experienced as deprivation. What was loneliness? The grinding awareness of not being enough by yourself becomes something quieter and more stable. Not the forced contentment of someone who has given up on connection, but the natural ease of someone who no longer requires connection to confirm that they exist. This is Advaitam not as a philosophical position, but as a felt shift. The same silence, different ground beneath it. The ego's sense of incompleteness feels like a fact about you. It is a fact about how you are currently identifying yourself. The ego, what Vedanta calls ahamkara, the lower self, is constitutionally dependent. It is the part of you that wakes up each morning and quietly takes stock. What do I have? Who needs me? Is anyone there? Left to itself, it will always register a shortage because its entire structure is built around accumulating support from the outside. A measuring instrument that only measures lack will always find lack. The problem arises when you take the instrument's reading as a report about reality. Your actual nature, what Vedanta calls the atma, the self, has an entirely different character. It is poornatvam, intrinsically full, requiring nothing to be added to it in order to be complete. Not complete once you arrive somewhere, not complete when the relationship works. Complete noun, by nature, the way a circle is not a circle working toward closure, but is already and definitively closed. Most people hold this at arm's length, interesting if true, but it doesn't touch the ache. The resistance is understandable, because the fullness being pointed to here is not a warm glow or a wave of contentment. Feelings come and go. They are products of the mind, which means they are products of the very layer that registered the shortage in the first place. Poornatvam is not a feeling you achieve. It is the nature you are, which remains unchanged whether a given feeling is present or absent. The Vedantic term for this unchanging nature is asangasvabhava, the untainted nature of the self, defined precisely as being intimately close to everything without being dependent on or altered by anything. It does not say the self is distant from experience, cold or withdrawn. It says the self accommodates all experience, every joy, every grief, every relationship, every loss, without being constituted by any of it. A film screen is touched by every image projected onto it. The warmth of a fire in the movie falls on the screen. The darkness of a night scene covers the screen. Yet when the projector stops, the screen shows no burn mark, no residue of darkness. Every scene passed through it completely. None of them left a mark. The screen was never the fire. It was the condition that made the fire visible. Your awareness has this same quality. Every feeling of loneliness, every surge of connection, every collapse when someone left, these move through awareness without altering the awareness itself. You have been watching the fire on the screen and concluding the screen must be burning. The feeling of emptiness arises in your awareness. It is registered by your awareness. When it subsides, your awareness remains. The awareness did not grow when fullness was felt, and it did not shrink when emptiness arrived. Something that cannot be diminished by loss and cannot be increased by gain is, by any sensible definition, already whole. The confusion, universal, not personal, is that we inherit a way of looking at ourselves from the outside in. We check what we have, what we lack, who is present, who is gone, and then draw conclusions about our interior condition. Vedanta reverses this. The interior is the unchanging ground in which all exterior arrangements appear and disappear. You are not the sum of your relationships. You are the awareness in which every relationship has ever occurred. Poornatvam is what is already the case, obscured, not absent. If this completeness is already present, why does the ache feel so immediate and real? That question has a precise answer, and it begins with identifying who is aware of the ache. The emptiness you feel is an experience. Every experience, without exception, requires two things: something being experienced and something doing the experiencing. The pain of loneliness, the ache of a failed relationship, the flat gray of an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when no one has called. These are the content. Content requires a container. You have been identifying as the content. You are the container. Right now, there may or may not be a feeling of lack somewhere in you, a heaviness, a flatness, a quiet ache. You can describe it. The fact that you can describe it means you are observing it. The one observing it is not the same as the thing being observed. You are not the feeling. You are the one noticing the feeling. This is what Vedanta calls Sakshi Caitanyam, witness consciousness, the unbroken awareness that observes the contents of the mind without becoming those contents. The feeling of emptiness is a content within you, the way a storm is a content within the sky. If awareness were empty, the emptiness could not be known. A void cannot witness itself. The very fact that you know the room is empty proves that the one at the door is fully present. The despair has been treated as a fact about you. The sky does not become the storm. It holds the storm, accommodates it fully, and remains unchanged by it. When the storm passes, the sky has lost nothing, because the sky never was the storm. The mistake was identifying with the storm and then asking why the sky felt so heavy. This is not a metaphor asking you to suppress emotion or pretend the storm is not violent. Grief after a loss, the disorientation after a long relationship ends, the ache of feeling chronically unseen, these are real movements, and the Sakshi watches them completely without flinching. What changes is not the intensity of what passes through. What changes is the identification. You stop being the weather and recognize yourself as what the weather moves through. The practical edge of this is precise. When loneliness arises, instead of immediately reaching for the phone, or rehearsing the argument, or calculating whether someone loves you enough, pause. Ask, who is aware of this loneliness? Not as a clever trick to avoid the feeling, but as a genuine question. The loneliness is there, but something in you is registering it. That something is not lonely. It watches loneliness the way a physician watches a fever, closely, clearly, without catching the disease. The Sakshi is what you already are. It has been present through every relationship, every loss, every period of emptiness. The silent and unchanged awareness in which all of it appeared. The chronic sense of lack, apurnatvam. The ego's judgment that it is small and insufficient, never touched it. The screen is unmarked by the fires that burned on it. You have been asking why relationships cannot fill the emptiness. If you are the awareness in which emptiness itself appears, what exactly is there to fill? Here is what changes when the sense of lack is no longer running the show. Not the relationships themselves. The same people may be present. The same daily interactions continue. What changes is the position you occupy when you enter them. Until now, you have been arriving at every relationship carrying a bowl, waiting to see how much gets put in it. The question underneath every exchange, however silently, has been, does this person confirm that I am worth being with? That question is the bowl. As long as you are holding it, every relationship is a transaction. You give attention, time, affection, and wait to receive back the validation that temporarily quiets the underlying verdict of lack. Love looks outward, toward what the other receives. Raga looks inward, toward what I get out of this. When a relationship organized around raga delivers, when the reassurance comes, when the attention is returned, there is relief. Relief is the temporary silencing of a noise that will resume. This is why the same ache returns after every good conversation, every declaration of affection, every moment of genuine closeness. The closeness was real. The relief was real. Neither touched the root, because the root was never a missing person. It was a mistaken verdict about yourself. When that verdict is examined and found false, when the felt sense of incompleteness is traced back to its source and the source turns out to be a cognitive error, not a factual condition, the bowl disappears. Not because you have forced yourself to stop needing, but because the need was built on an assumption that no longer holds. You were the one who was never lacking. The self, which Vedanta names Atma, does not require external additions to be whole. It is a purna, I am full, not as an aspiration or a practice, but as a description of what was always already the case. From that ground, the entire structure of relationship shifts. You are no longer a beggar moving from person to person with a bowl. You are someone with something to give. You can be genuinely present with another person, interested in them, glad of their company, not because their presence fills you, but because your own fullness makes presence possible. When they leave, there is no collapse. The journey continues. When a parent loves a child without using the child's need as a source of their own significance, that love can bear the child growing up and leaving. When two people enter a relationship without using each other as answers to the question of their own worth, the relationship can survive disagreement, change, and distance, because it was never a crutch holding up a structure that couldn't stand on its own. The realization of aham purna does not produce a person who feels nothing. It produces a person whose feeling is no longer primarily about themselves, about whether enough is coming in, about whether the bowl is being filled. What remains, once that anxiety is resolved, is something closer to what the word love is pointing at. Attention directed outward, steadily, without the constant backward glance toward one's own account balance. Relationships cannot fill the emptiness because the emptiness was never a gap in your external life. It was a misidentification of your internal nature. The self is not incomplete. It was never incomplete. What you were looking for in other people was always already what you are. Recognizing that does not end your relationships. It ends your dependence on them, which is the only thing that was preventing you from being fully present within them. Love given freely from a place that does not need anything back is not a practice to be cultivated. It is the natural expression of a self that has stopped mistaking itself for something small.